Welcome to another deep dive, and this one's going to be awesome. It's especially for anyone thinking about that UPSC exam, the one. We're going deep into the early Vedic period, 1500 to 1000 BC. Crucial for understanding Indian history and culture. And yeah, especially that GS1 paper.
You got it. It's the foundation of it all, really.
Yeah,
Everything you see later in Indian civilization, all those cultural, social, even political ideas, they have roots back in this era.
and get this, our guidebook. It's the Rigveda, the oldest literary document in the world. Isn't that amazing? We can actually learn about how they lived, what they believed, even what they struggled with, from something written thousands of years ago. Talk about a primary source.
It really is. It's recognized by UNESCO. And here's another fascinating thing. The Rigveda, it wasn't just stuck in India. It actually spread all across Asia, influenced cultures in Central Asia, even Southeast Asia. It's like this ancient text set off a chain reaction. We're still seeing the effects today.
Okay, so let's rewind back to the beginning. It's about 1500 BC. The Aryans arrive in northwest India. They set up shop in a place called the Sapta Sindhu, the land of seven rivers. We won't list them all, but what's important is that these rivers, they were the lifeblood of this whole civilization. They shaped where they lived, their economy, even how they saw the world.
Absolutely. The Aryans were pastoral people, skilled horsemen, raised cattle, these fertile river valleys. It was the perfect place for them. And that's where the Rigveda comes in. It's our main source for understanding this whole era. It gives us these glimpses into their social structure, religious beliefs, even their politics.
Okay, so the Rigveda itself, it's not just one book, right? It's a whole collection of texts. But for this deep dive, we're focusing on the Rigvedic Samhita. Those are the hymns at the heart of it all.
Exactly right. The Rigveda is divided into four parts: Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads. But for the early Vedic period, the Samhitas are the gold mine. Think of these hymns like poems, prayers, even dialogues. It's a window into how they believed, what rituals they did, how they interacted. It's like eavesdropping on conversations from thousands of years ago.
That's incredible. Okay, so we've got the Aryans, the Sapta Sindhu region, and the Rigveda as our guide. Let's jump into their society. What was life actually like back then?
It was surprisingly complex, much more than we might think, their politics. It was all about the Jana, the tribe. Each Jana had a Raja and the chief. He was responsible for protecting everyone and their cattle. But here's the twist. There was no hereditary rule yet. The Rajan was chosen by the people through these assemblies called the Sabha and Samiti.
So like democracy in ancient India, that's pretty cool. And these assemblies, they made what kind of decisions?
Think of them like forums. Everything was on the table. Matters of government warfare, even social issues. The Sabha, it was made up of elders. They advised the Rajan, even acted as a court of law. The Samiti was bigger, more people from the tribe. They'd debate things, give advice, even challenge the Rajan's decisions.
Interesting. So it wasn't just the Rajan calling all the shots. He had to listen to what the people thought. But does that mean everybody was equal back then?
Well, that's where it gets a bit tricky. It wasn't as strict as the caste system that came later, but you start to see this hierarchy developing. But it wasn't based on family or birth. It was more about your role in the tribe.
Okay, so what were some of these roles that started to shape their society?
Well, for example, priests, they were called purohitas.
Yeah.
They were gaining importance. They conducted sacrifices or yajnas. Those were super important for the well-being of the tribe. And of course, family or kula, that was the basic unit of society, patriarchal structure for sure. But even then, women had more rights and agency than you might think.
Wait, women having more rights than expected in ancient India. This is for our UPSC folks out there. Always expect the unexpected. Tell me more about this.
Well, the Rigveda mentions women poets like Apala and Gosa. Their hymns are still studied today. These women, they weren't just there. They were active in their society, contributing to their intellectual and spiritual life. And another thing, women had a say in choosing their husbands. Some even put off marriage to pursue education or other interests.
So it's not as simple as we might think when it comes to women in the early Vedic period. It reminds us that history's full of surprises. The Rigveda challenges us to look deeper. But we've talked about the politics, the assemblies, how society was structured, the status of women. What about their economy? How did they make a living?
Picture this, a world where wealth is measured in cows.
Okay, you've got my attention.
Yeah.
Cows. So they provided milk and dairy, but were cows also like currency?
Exactly. Cattle rearing was their main thing. A rich man was called a gomat, meaning owner of many cattle. They even fought battles over cattle. Gavishti, it means search for cows, shows you how important they were.
So cows were like the gold standard of the early Vedic period. But besides herding, did they do anything else?
They did some farming, but it was limited. Mostly barley. No iron tools yet. And the rivers were unpredictable, so they had to move around a lot.
Limited farming, no iron tools, unpredictable rivers. It sounds like they had to be pretty resourceful to get by. But if cows were their main wealth, how did they trade for other things?
Barter system cows were the most valuable thing. Use them for trading gifts, especially to priests. Gopati, that refers to the chief who protected the cows, shows you how much they valued them. Even the word duhitri means daughter. It literally translates to one who milks the cows. That's how central they were.
So cows were more than just livestock. They were a way of life. It's amazing how the Rigveda gives us these details. We can actually see their economic system and how important cattle were to their whole society.
It reminds us that even in ancient civilizations, economics was tied to social structure, religious beliefs, even political power. The Rigveda gives us the clues to untangle it all and get a deeper understanding of the early Vedic period.
Okay, so we've got their arrival, their social structure, that unique cow-based economy, and it's all right there in the Rigveda. But now let's dive into the spiritual side. What about their religious beliefs?
Well, their religious scene was pretty different from what we see later on in Indian history. For one thing, they were polytheistic, multiple gods, and no temples or idols. Their focus was nature and its forces.
So the divine was everywhere. The sky, the rivers, the storms. That must have made their world feel so alive, so powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And each god represented a different part of nature and played a role in keeping things in balance. Indra, the god of thunder and rain, he was a big one, often shown as a warrior battling chaos and bringing the rain to nourish the land.
Indra, the storm god. He sounds intense. What other gods should we know about? Especially for those UPSC aspirants out there, understanding this whole pantheon. It's key for GS1.
Right. Agni, the fire god, he was important too. Think of him as the middleman between humans and the gods, carrying their offerings up in the sacrificial fire. And then there's Varuna, the sky and cosmic order. He was all about truth and justice. And of course, Surya, the sun god, bringing light and life to the world. Each of these gods played a part in their lives, their rituals, how they understood the universe.
It's amazing how their beliefs were so tied to nature, to the elements all around them. But what about goddesses? Did they have a place in all of this?
While most of the big names were male goddesses, were definitely important too. Usha's the goddess of dawn. She was loved for her beauty and the promise of a new day. Sarasvati, the goddess of knowledge and wisdom. She was especially important for those seeking knowledge, something our UPSC listeners can relate to.
Absolutely. And let's not forget Prithvi, the earth goddess, fertility and abundance, essential for a society that depended so much on farming and cattle. But how did they show their devotion to these gods? Was it all big rituals and ceremonies?
Rituals and sacrifices. They were central to their religious practices. Remember the Purohitas, the priests? They were like the go-betweens between humans and the gods, conducting these ceremonies to please the deities and ask for their blessings.
Right, the Purohitas, the keepers of the sacred flame. So what kind of sacrifices are we talking about?
Animal sacrifices were pretty common. Cows, horses, goats offered up to the gods. But it's important to remember this wasn't seen as cruelty. It was sacred, a way to connect with the divine and maintain that cosmic balance. They believed that by offering some of their wealth, they were ensuring the well-being of the tribe and keeping the natural cycles going.
So we need to see these practices through their eyes, not ours. But were these big ceremonies just for the elites, or did everyone get to participate?
Religion was woven into their daily lives. Everyone was involved. Besides the large-scale sacrifices the priests did, families had their own rituals at home to ask for the gods' blessings for health and prosperity. It was a personal way to connect with the divine, bringing the sacred into everyday life.
So religion wasn't just for temples or special events, it was everywhere. It's fascinating to see how these beliefs shaped how they saw the world and their place in it.
And it's because of the Rigveda that we have access to this whole world of religious beliefs and practices. It's like we're right there watching their rituals, listening to their prayers, witnessing their conversations with the gods. It lets us explore not just the facts, but the very heart of the early Vedic period.
Okay, we've explored their arrival, their social structure, that unique economy, and their vibrant religious landscape, all super important for understanding ancient India. But the Rigveda also mentions a huge event, a clash of titans.
Yeah.
You could say the Battle of the Ten Kings.
Yeah, the Battle of the Ten Kings. It was a big one. It gives us a look into the politics of the time. It was the Parata tribe, led by King Sudas, against a group of 10 other tribes. They were fighting for land and resources, especially those fertile lands along the rivers.
So this wasn't just a small fight. It was a power struggle that changed everything. It sounds epic.
And the Rigveda describes it in detail. All the bravery of the warriors and the intensity of the battle. It tells us that King Sudas and the Harla tribe, they won. They solidified their control over the region. That victory had big consequences. The Hardas ended up playing a huge role in how Indian civilization developed.
Wow, so this battle wasn't just about armies clashing. It was a turning point in history. And we know about it because of the Rigveda, this ancient text that's kept these stories and insights alive. It's incredible how it lets us witness those victories and struggles from so long ago.
The Rigveda is not just a book of hymns, it's a historical record, a window to the past that connects us to the people who shaped Indian civilization. It's a testament to the power of storytelling and the enduring legacy of the early Vedic period.
And a reminder that history is about people, their lives, their beliefs, and the things that changed their world.
Exactly. By studying the Rigveda, we understand not just ancient India, but ourselves and our place in this long and fascinating story of humanity.
Okay, so we've covered the big picture stuff, the arrival, the social and political structures, those unique beliefs, even a major battle. But now I want to zoom in. What about everyday life? What can the Rigveda tell us about their homes, clothes, food, the stuff that makes up a life?
It shows us a society that was really connected to nature. People lived in villages along the rivers. Their homes were probably simple, made of wood, mud bricks, thatched roofs. They kind of blended right into the environment.
So nothing fancy, no palaces or big buildings, just a simple way of life, living with nature. What about clothes? What did they wear back then?
The Rigveda mentions clothes made from stuff they could easily find. Wool, animal skins, plant fibers. They wore this lower garment called a nevi. It was like a wraparound skirt. And an upper garment called vasas, maybe a shawl or a cloak. And men and women both wore jewelry, necklaces, bracelets, earrings, often made from beads, gold, even precious stones.
So even way back then, people had their own style. They expressed themselves through clothes and accessories. It's like these were real people,
Right.
with their own tastes and culture. Well, what about food? What did they eat?
Their diet was mostly based on what they could get from their herds and their farms. Bread made from barley flour, that was a staple, plus dairy products, milk, butter, ghee. They also ate fruits, vegetables, honey, whatever the land provided. And meat, especially beef, was eaten mostly during those sacrificial rituals.
So they ate what was around them, what they could produce themselves. Sounds pretty balanced and healthy. But beyond the necessities, did they have any fun, any entertainment?
The Rigveda talks about music and dancing. They were a big part of their rituals and social gatherings. They played instruments like the flute, the lute drums. Their hymns even suggest they had storytelling and poetry. Imagine those nights gathered around a fire, sharing stories of gods and heroes with music and dancing.
I can almost see it. The firelight, the drums, the stories.
Yep.
It's like even back then, people wanted to connect, to celebrate, to be creative.
Exactly. And we also know they were into chariot racing and even gambling, a bit of excitement and competition.
So they had their thrills too, just like us. But what really strikes me is that deep respect for nature. It's everywhere in their hymns, their rituals, their whole worldview.
That's a big takeaway from the Rigveda. They saw the divine in everything. The sun, the moon, the rivers, the animals, all connected, all worthy of respect. It reminds us that humans have always had this deep connection with nature.
And maybe it's a connection we need to think about more these days. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into the early Vedic period, I'm just in awe of how rich and complex their civilization was.
The Rigveda has given us a peek into this ancient world, and it feels surprisingly close to home. It shows the power of human connection, creativity, and our search for meaning.
And for our UPSC friends out there, we hope this deep dive gave you some insights and a good foundation for your GS1 prep. Remember, the early Vedic period, it's not just a textbook chapter. It's woven into the very fabric of Indian civilization.
And for everyone else, we hope this sparked your curiosity, maybe even inspired you to explore the amazing world of ancient India. The Rigveda's out there, just waiting to be discovered. It's a window to a world that shaped history and still speaks to us today.